In this part, we will cover how to manually check the open-ended questions that we assigned on our quiz, as well as some of the other questions that needed to be manually checked. So once you are in your Google Classroom, you can click on the Grades tab to check if any students have submitted the assessment. Once you are there, you can see all the previous assignments that you have already assigned and that students might have already done and have been graded. And you can also see your students on the left-hand side along with their overall grades. I'm going to click on the solar system assessment, which is the one that I will be manually checking. And as you can see, I have an overview of how many students have turned it in and how many students have not worked on it yet. Below, I can see the quiz and I can also see all my students and their status for the quiz. So as I can see here, the first 3 students have turned it in and the last 3 students still have not worked on it yet. So therefore, I want to check on the 3 students that have already turned it in. So in order to do that, I can go ahead and go back to my quiz. Once I have my assessment open, I can see that at the top, I have 2 tabs, one for questions, which is where we built the assessment, and the second one is for responses. I can see that I have 4 responses, and although I did have 3 students that turned it in, one of the responses was the one that I did when I previewed the quiz. So you're gonna go ahead and click on responses. And as you can see, you have 3 tabs here. One is for the summary, which will give you an overall summary of how many students have already responded, the points scored. It'll give you the summary of the students' responses, and so on and so forth. So this is just a brief summary of each of the questions and how the students scored. To manually grade questions in your assessment, you have 2 options. You can do so from the question tab or the individual tab. We're going to go over the question tab first. Once you're in the question tab, you're going to see that you have a drop-down menu which will allow you to see all the questions on your assessment or quiz. You're going to want to select the very first question in your quiz. And it is always good practice to go over all the questions because you will have some that although the student answered correctly, they were not given the point. For example, this first question, which was our short answer question about a natural satellite of a planet is called. The first 3 students were grouped here because they answered with moon with capital M, and they did receive the point. Another student answered with moon all lowercase, and they did receive the point for that. But there might be some cases where the student might have misspelled the word, or maybe they spelled the word with a capital letter at the very end, and you did not expect that. So if they did, they will not get the point, although they did type in the correct word. So if that was the case, then you would see something like this where the student did not get the point because either they misspelled the word or they inserted a capital letter somewhere and it did not recognize it as the correct word. So you can manually change that by just clicking the green check mark here, and it'll change to 1 point out of 1. So the student has been given 1 point out of 1 for this question. And then you want to save that so the changes will save. So like I said, it's always good practice to go through all the questions just to make sure that the students did get the appropriate points. So to move on to the next question, I can click the next arrow here. And the next question was a open-ended question, which was our paragraph question where students were able to type in more than 1 sentence for their response. And so I am able to check and see if I'm satisfied with the answer that they gave. I can give them the point by clicking the green check mark here. It'll give them that 1 point. And here it will not group the answers by commonality because each answer here is going to be different since it's an open-ended paragraph type of question. So I will give all these students a point. And I also have the option of giving them feedback. So if I gave the student the point here, but I want to give them feedback when they get their quiz or their assessment returned to them. I can click on add feedback, and I can type in for them to be more specific the next time, or I can send them a link to get more information about the moon, or I can even attach a video for them to watch an informative video about the moon. So once I provide my feedback, I can save it, and the student will be able to see that feedback once the quiz or the assessment is returned to them. I want to save those changes and move on to the next question. So the next question was auto-graded, so I don't have to worry about it because it was a true or false question, and I can see that all students answered true and got it correct. So for those questions that are auto-graded, you don't really need to worry about those, but the open-ended questions and some of the other ones that we assign, you do have to manually check. So this was also a auto-graded question, so I don't have to worry about it. I can skip it. And the next question was the question where students had to check off all the true statements for Mercury. And as I can see, 2 students were able to check off all 3 statements or facts correct, and 2 students were only able to identify 2 of the correct facts. So as you can see here, it automatically did not give them the 2 points, but I can change that by adding 2 points here for each of the facts that they were able to identify correct. So although it didn't automatically give them the 3 points because they missed one of the facts, I can go in here myself and give them 2 points for those 2 facts that they did identify correctly. So once I'm done, I'm going to save the changes, and I'm going to move on to the next question. This question was also auto-graded. This was our drop-down menu type of question where students had to drop down the menu and select the response, and you can see that all students got it correct. In this next question, we asked students to sketch the sun and 9 planets in order. We also asked them to take a picture of their sketch and upload the file here. So these are the students that have already turned in their sketches or their files, and I can go through each one of them and click on the image to see exactly what they submitted. And if I'm satisfied with it, then I will give them a point by clicking the green check mark here. If I am not satisfied with what they turned in, I can click the X and no points will be assigned to them. So again, you will have to manually go through each one and decide whether the students earned the point and either click the green check mark to give them the point or click the X to mark incorrect. I will then save and keep moving through the assessment questions. In this next question, we had a linear scale type of question where students would have to choose from the scale how far Pluto was from the sun, and it is the 9th farthest. So I can see that 4 students responded with the correct answer, but this was another type of question that had to be manually checked because it did not allow us to preset the correct answer. So in this case, I can say that these students got it correct. So I can click the green check mark here to assign them the point and save. And moving on, this was an auto-graded type of question, so I do not have to spend time on it. The next question, I can see that all 4 students were able to identify the 3 characteristics correctly for each planet. If there was any students that failed to correctly identify all 3 characteristics for 1 or more of the planets, I would see them below, and then I can choose whether I want to give them points for the characteristics that they did identify correctly, or I can choose that I don't want to give them any points because they didn't identify all 3 correctly. So again, that could be done with these 2 buttons. But in this case, so far, the students that have responded have been able to identify all 3 characteristics correctly. And then we get to our final questions, which were the date and time. And here you can see that all 4 students were able to identify that we celebrated Earth Day this year on April 22nd. So I will give them the point by clicking the green check mark here. Then I will save and move on to the next question. And our last question was about what time does the sun set? So as you can see here, I have a variety of answers and I can go through each one of them and give them the point by clicking the green check mark once more, or I can choose to count it incorrect by clicking the X here. Once I am done again, once more, I will save. And as you can see, that is the last question that we manually check. The other option that you have to manually check student quizzes or student assessments is by clicking on the individual tab here. And you will see that you have a drop-down menu at the very top, and it'll give you all the students that have already completed this quiz by their email address. So once you click the student's name, you can then go through the student's assessment individually and check their assessment and give the appropriate points for each of the questions. So here is the first open-ended question that the student answered. And if they did not receive the point, I can give them the point by clicking the up arrow here. And now the student has received 1 out of 1 points for this question. As I keep scrolling down, I can continue to check. This was the second open-ended question, which was a paragraph question. And I can see that the student answered with this one sentence, which satisfies the purpose for this sentence, but I want to give the student more feedback about this topic. So I can add individual feedback if I wish to here. I'm going to insert my feedback for the student to see when they receive their quiz or their assessment back. So I'm going to save this feedback, and you can see that it's been saved here, so the student will be able to review it once their quiz is returned. I could then keep moving through the questions past the ones that have already been auto-graded for me and get to the ones that I need to manually check, which would be something like the file upload question that we included for them to submit their sketch. So I can take a look at the student's sketch, and I can see they only have a picture of a sun. So they did not meet the requirement for this question. So I'm not going to give them any points. So I will leave this at 0. And I can also add some feedback here. I have added that the student is missing the 9 planets in their sketch. I can then save this feedback so that the student will be able to see it when their assessment is returned. I will keep scrolling through the questions and decide if the student received the appropriate points for each of the questions. Then once I am done checking, I will save. If I wanted to populate the student grades into a Google Sheets, I can do that by clicking this icon here on the top right corner under responses. And once I click on it, it'll ask me if I want to create a new spreadsheet with my students' grades. I can click create, and it'll automatically populate a Google Sheet that will give me a timestamp as to what time did the student work on this assessment. It'll also give me their email address. But if you notice, this is the reason why I like to add their first and last name, because I can see their email address, but sometimes it'll be hard to tell which student is which because some students have very similar email addresses or names. And so having them input their first and last name in their assessment at the beginning of the assessment easily helps me to identify the students, and then I can organize this spreadsheet by filtering by name in ascending or descending order. It'll also give me the students' independent responses here, so I can better see my students' answers all in one sheet. And now it is time to release the score. So I can individually release the score from here for each student assessment that I have gone over. As you can see, it tells me right now that the score has not been released. So I can choose to release the score for the student, or once I'm done checking all the students' assessments, I can then go to summary and release all scores here at once. So you have those two options. You can release scores individually, or you can release all scores at the same time. So because I am done checking all the students that have turned in this assessment so far, I am going to release the scores all at once. When I release the scores, it's going to send the students an email letting them know that their assessment has been checked, and it will show them their actual score. So I can also choose to include a message here. So I'm going to include a congratulatory message that students will be able to see once they receive their email with their score. Now, students will only be able to see this if they actually use their emails and check their emails. This does not mean that the score has already been imported into your Google Classroom gradebook. So in order to do that, I would have to go back to my gradebook. And as you can see here, the grades have not been imported yet for those students that I have already checked their assessments for. The way that you will import the grade is by clicking on the Import Grades button here on the top right corner. So once I do that, you will see that the grades will appear in this section here. And it'll ask me if I'm sure that I want to import grades at this time. I'm going to click import and you will now see the grades that have been imported here. As you can see, grades were not imported for students that have not turned in the quiz, but I can check and import those grades later as they come in. So if I wanted to, I could now at this point return the grades to the students' Google Classroom so that they can view under their classwork. And I can do that in two different ways. I can do that individually for each student. If I click on the three dotted menu next to the student, I can return their assessment grade so that they're able to view on their side in their Google Classroom under classwork. Or I can do so by selecting only the students that have turned it in, which are these three first students here. And I can click the return button at the top. So once I do that, it'll give me this message saying that the students will be notified that I have graded their assessment. And I can also leave a well done message for them to see on their returned assessment. So once I click return, my gradebook will now change in that the students that have turned it in will move to the bottom of the list here under the graded section. And now I will see the students that have not done the assessment yet at the very top under the assigned status. This is how you can keep track of how many students have not turned in the work, how many students have turned in the work and it has been graded. So you can sort by status by clicking the down arrow here as well. If you want to sort by last name, first name, or by status. So right now, the option that I have on is to sort by status so I can keep track of the students that have completed the assessment and the students that have not completed the assessment. Another option you have here are the points. So you can change the points here if you choose to, or you can make this assessment or this assignment as ungraded. So that means that the students still have to work on it, but it will not affect their overall average grade because it will not be graded. Another option you have on your Google Gradebook is that you can click on this upper right hand gear and you can copy all the grades to Google Sheets. So if I wanted to, I can copy all the grades, all my student grades into a Google Sheet to be able to view later. So once I click on it, you will see that the Google Sheet would automatically populate and you will be able to see all the assignments that you have given your students and their grades. Another option is that you can download all the grades as an Excel spreadsheet. So if I click here, it will automatically download that spreadsheet for me to open and work on offline. The third option is to just download these grades. If I were to click this option, it will only download the grades from this assignment. So I can do that to keep track of individual assignments and so on and so forth. So these are the features that you have in your Google Classroom Gradebook.